Well, thanks for
Thank you
hopping
so
on.
much, John. Man, for doing this so fast and late. We managed to get a lot of people together here.
Cool.
So Jehar is actually not usually the host. Jehar is a very well-known Doom, Quake, esports commentator and organizer and so on. So he knows everything there's to know about everything you worked on as well. Ty, the actual host, he's asleep right now because when I got Brenda's message, it's like, Ty, wake up. And so Jehar
like, I'm not getting up.
He's gonna be sorry.
He's
gonna
be pissed off, and I want to hear what that sounds like when he wakes up.
Reaction video.
But thanks for hopping on, and yeah, I guess there's been a lot to catch up on, right? Because you haven't been as vocal lately, not since like the Sigil release, right? Like you've been kind of doing your own thing. You're still in Galway, right?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, we're still in Galway.
Well, what's it been like there? It's been a crazy year for everybody, but it's kind of manifested in different ways for us all. From like the Doom and Quake communities, there's been like kind of a resurgence. People have more time at home. Surprise, surprise. So there's been a ton of activity. Have you been pretty active yourself?
Well, yeah. I mean, we're working every day on our game. So that's years before COVID.
Yeah. So that explains.
We just started working at home.
That explains the cave, right? Because once you start actually going into real dev mode, you don't want to go outside for a while.
Yeah, it's not really a problem. I mean, it is really nice outside.
It is really nice right now, at least. It wasn't a few
Of course it
months
is.
ago.
Yeah.
I have the excuse that it's miserable outside, so I'm happy to be in my cave.
Yeah.
But I haven't been developing anything. So you've been working your fingers to the bone?
Yeah, just working away on Empire of Sin. It's turning out really great. We're really happy with it. So that's super cool. Working on Dangerous Dave Big Box Collector's Edition kind of thing.
Oh my god, that sounds fantastic. Tell us more about that. I'm interested in Empire of Sin, but come on.
Yeah.
Big boxes, Dangerous Dave. What's that about?
Yeah, well, the original Dave, there have actually been a lot of Dave. I think 12 versions of Dave released. There's the 1988 Apple II version. Then there's my 1990 PC version, which everybody knows. Like that's the one that got out. It's funny. The reason why it's been so popular in India and Pakistan because when people bought their computers, the people who sold the computers would install Dave on every computer. So it was like Solitaire, Minesweeper, and Dave in those two countries forever. And so it got really, really popular, like even more than Doom, which is pretty nuts.
All paid copies, surely. Yeah.
Yeah.
The funny thing about Dave is it's been free ever since I've made Dave. At least the ones that I've made, they've always been a free game, like a demonstration of something. Like the very first Dave on the Apple II was a demo for the Apple Soft Basic assembly language add-on that I created so people could make arcade games with my add-on, but from Basic. And Dave was an example of like how you could do that. So it was free almost. It was like, here's the game that shows you how to use this thing. And then the 1990 version of Dave was the free sampler demo disc for Gamer's Edge to show people what kind of games they would get on Gamer's Edge. So that was free. And then when I put out the re-release of Dave in 2015 on iOS and Android, or no, it was just iOS. That was a free game because it's a mobile download and it's free to play. So you could get that for free as well.
So it's been free all the time.
It's basically been free the whole time. So now I'm finally going to, sell a big box and see if people want that because it's going to have like a bunch of cool stuff inside the box. Like the USB is a shotgun shell.
Oh, that's so cool.
Love that.
And the trophies and little gems and stuff like that are from the game. They're all inside
show him your ammo box. The Doom ammo box.
Well, this was just like an eBay find, right? Because the actual like ammo crate that was used for the final Doom like box, like this is the actual like.
Right.
That's the crate. That's it. I still need to like redo the sticker because it didn't come out quite with the colors I wanted, but I might throw a Raspberry Pi in there or something.
You found the one that they took the picture of.
Yeah, this is it. Like, and what was impressive to me is that it wasn't just the front cover; it was the back cover too, because this is where they had like the screenshot of the imp with the firewall.
Oh yeah, they were
and, like, all the copy
in
and stuff.
slots.
So they use both sides of the box. So who knows? I might like get all the copy.
You need
on
to
there.
build a computer into that one.
That was
it's very airtight. It's very thick walls. The heat dissipation would be non-existent, which is by design, but it's fun.
That was the Richards Group R&D team in Dallas that did that. They're the ones that did all of our advertising and our boxes from Quake forward, even through Ion Storm. So as soon as we were getting into, well, actually it was before Quake. Hexen might have been the first thing that we did with them. And they're the ones who did all of the Hummer advertising. So when Hummer was doing all of their trucks and stuff back in the 90s,
Is that why you got your yellow Hummer back then? Was that because of that?
No, actually, I got it beforehand. It was like this bizarre coincidence that like I got the yellow one was my second one. And when I had that one, we also got involved with the Richards Group. And then we found out, they're the ones doing all the Hummer ads and the booklets and all that stuff, for the dealerships.
Yeah.
So that was, and they look really good. And they had a new R&D department because they wanted to get into games. So the Hummer stuff was not part of R&D, and the R&D department was like, they're ultra creatives. They'll do crazy things. And so that's how we got with them. And then we had them kind of do Hexen as a test. And then after we started doing stuff with them, then Scott Miller wanted to start using them for Duke Nukem. So they're the ones who did the Duke stuff.
That's really fun because we tried to find the guy who did the classic illustrations for Duke to do some more stuff for us, and we realized that he it's one of those people who are not into games at all. They have no idea what they're doing. They just get told, hey, he needs to look a bit like Schwarzenegger and Stallone mixed together. Yeah. We found out that he owns a Christian art gallery, and after Duke was released, after he realized what kind of games that he was actually making artwork for, he just decided, I'm never touching this again, and then he kind of retired to do Christian artwork.
But you're saving them.
Wow.
You're saving them. That's fine.
Yes.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, the guy who did the Doom logo also on the cover of the game box had nothing to do with games ever.
That's fascinating. How much of that process was like a back and forth? I mean, you said that they were the creatives. Was it like totally like go nuts and you get it back once?
With Richards Group, I would go over there a lot. I went over there a lot, and I got to know everybody there. And we sat down, and kind of they'd tell me what their ideas were, and I would just say, "Yeah, that's cool. Try." Because they would make little comps of everything, and then we get to choose the direction that we like. And then, they sometimes like, we got a really cool idea for Hexen for like scratching stuff up and everything. Yeah. So we're just like, go ahead, go nuts, and then we'll see if we like it. And it was cool because they also use external people who are really artistic as well. So like the Hexen thing, the layout and design stuff was done internally, but like the character on Hexen was done by an external artist. And so he was like taking pictures of stuff and doing all these, layering pictures and all this crazy stuff. So it was really neat. And they also did our radio ads for the Ultimate Doom and for Hexen. So I have those radio ads as well. And they, like with the radio ads with Hexen, they did multiple ads for each of the characters, like the cleric and the barbarian.
Did they also do the master level stuff with like the one like skull with like the cool little like curvy thing?
They took Adrian's they took Adrian's art, and it was already a black and white pencil sketch anyway, so it was easy for them to just kind of take that and wrap it around the box. But they did everything. They did Final Doom, and they did like the Daikatana box. The bitch ad was done by a woman at R&D.
All the same stuff.
She's the one who came up with
all that stuff.
She came up with everything.
The Quake boxes. I mean, the Hexen stuff. Doom. I mean, all
Heretic
of that is like
well.
All of that is like typically
not
90s.
Heretic. Heretic was not.
Oh, really?
Them.
Okay.
We did Heretic internally. What happened was Brom did Doom 2's box. Boris Vallejo's wife, Julie Bell, did the original.
Yeah.
Right. So she did the original one, and we didn't like the way the Cyber Demon looked. So we just said, we're not going to use that. Forget it. So then we went with Braum, and he did an amazing job with Doom 2. And, right after that, because Doom 2 came out just a few months before Heretic did. So we're just like, hey, can you do a cover for our next game? It's called Heretic, and this is what's in it. So he did the Heretic as well. And
hey, Gerald, you got
that game. It was so good. His art is so good that we used it to make the poster inside the game. And on the back of the poster is the entire manual, and you can just fold the whole thing up. And so it's not a useless manual. You can undo the whole thing, and now it's a poster on your wall.
Yeah,
so it was a useful manual.
Especially the Shadow of the Serpent Rider, the second release with the new box art with the skull in the middle of the book. That especially has a really special place for me. That one and Hexen 2, they're both a very specific type of box art, and they're very similar to Sigil as well in terms of the type of box. You have some kind of tome or a book or something with a symbol in the middle. It's super cool.
I don't know how far along our research group R&D was involved after we moved everything over to Activision, because I think they did their own stuff.
Yeah.
But when GT was doing it, we're the ones who basically said, hey, GT, this is who we're using. So they're like, okay. But then as soon as it goes to Activision, everything shifts over to Activision. And I think that Heretic 2 was Activision.
Yeah.
All of those are like 90s as fuck, but they're part of why we call 90s as fuck, 90s as fuck. I mean, that was like the genesis of a lot of that look. And Fred mentioned the Sigil box, which is beautiful. But now we're like harking back to what 3 or 4 guys did all these years later. We're still trying to get that same vibe out of it.
The Sigil was great.
The whole box art form, it's kind of lost. This classic art form of creating beautiful illustrated box art there's not many doing it left, unfortunately.
Yeah, with Sigil, I did 2 boxes, and I didn't want the logo on the front.
Yeah.
So that's different, right? Because normally you have the game box and you have the game's logo and title on it. So Sigil, I didn't want to have that on there.
More enigmatic, arcane.
Yeah. it's just the art. It's not the name of the game. It's the art that's there. And it looks, and the logo is pretty cool too. With the box, the Beast box has a 666 in the center, and that is the center of the logo is SI666IL, and that was pretty cool. That was developed at Romero Games.
It's been a little over a year and a half since the release of Sigil.
May of 2019, May 31st is when I finally uploaded it, and that's just because I wanted to make sure that the people who bought the boxes didn't have everybody playing the game before they got theirs, because the box, one of the draws of the box stuff is that you would get Buckethead's soundtrack, and people were saying, well, why didn't you just release the game, the free version, before everybody got that? And the reason is because I wanted them to get it first. I wanted them to get Buckethead's soundtrack before anyone else could get it. And if I had released the Buckethead soundtrack version that I have on the site right now, then that would have been everybody got the really cool stuff immediately.
Yeah.
So I just kind of held back on it a little bit until the boxes came out. Then I released the free version and the Buckethead version for 666.
Yeah, take notes, Fred.
Let's dive into the past a little bit, because I'm super interested in hearing something I think most people don't know you for, and that's going all the way back to the Apple II days, Softdisk days as well. So how did you start getting interested in games? When did you start playing and working and so on?
I played games in the 70s like crazy. So pinball before video games. Played pinball all the time when I was really young, and I went to an arcade in Arizona that was called Spanky's, and it was great. It was a classic dark rectangle, and cool, which is nice because it was in Tucson, Arizona, where it's 100 something. So it was a really great place to go. It was really cold, and there's pinball machines, 30 pinball machines in there, so that AC was really working. And after it was probably mid 70s, and one day when I go over there, this big machine is on the opposite wall of the pinball machines, and it's a game called Dune Buggy, and it's a giant cabinet. Like pinball machines are pretty big cabinets too, but this is taller than I am, and there's glass in the front of it. It's not like horizontal like a pinball machine. It's on the front, and when you look into it, you see like this landscape, and there's a black light on fluorescent paint all over the thing, and it looks really cool. And I was like, what is this? When you put your quarter in, and you're basically maneuvering a car on a rotating landscape, trying to avoid the other cars that are there. And the other cars are they're Pepper's ghost illusions. So it's like, you have a physical car that just kind of goes back and forth in front of you, going around hills and stuff like that, and the ghost cars are moving around, and you're just trying to avoid them. And it was really cool. They're called electromechanical video arcade games, and that was before true like electronic video games. So it was a mechanical disc moving around in there, and that's the reason why when video games really started going, why that cabinet size remained is because they already were making those cabinets. Even though when the video arcade games started happening, there's just a motherboard in there and a CRT, and it's all empty. But they already were making cabinets. They already solved that problem, and people were used to it. So just deliver them a different thing instead of a piece of glass. Now it's a monitor, and it's still the same form factor, and it can, it's a big showpiece, in an arcade, and those people want to market the hell out of everything. So the bigger, the better. And it's like, well, this is how big they are, and so eventually there was a Targ video game next to it. And that was probably the first video game that I played, which is before I played Space Invaders, and then after that was probably Asteroids, and also just a ton of games from Exidy. Like there's Gunslingers and all this other stuff. So I played games all the time, Night Driver, you name it, all these 70s games that were pretty lame, but back then it was really cool because there's nothing like it.
How much of your week did you spend at Spanky's? Where'd you get the money for all this?
The funny thing is I got, this was like in the summertime when I was going to my grandma's, and I got $1 a day, and that's 4 games.
Right.
So I needed to get really good.
You gotta get good, yeah.
Good and selective.
Spend as much time as I could. The funny thing is every day I had to make a choice. I have $1, and I can either play 4 games or I can buy a Hot Wheels car.
Oh.
Because it was exactly $1.
Easy
And
choice.
so some days I did have to choose to get a Hot Wheels car, or a truck or something cool. But then when I had more money, like when I started really getting into it, I needed more money. So I got a paper route, and I was probably 12. And that paper route was basically I had to wake up at 3 a.m. and basically fold about 100 newspapers that are just delivered to the house, and I need to do it outside because I can't get that ink all over the carpet in the house, because there's a ton of ink comes off on everything when you're doing that. So I was folding as fast as I could, and then I basically have these huge bags, and I put put as many papers as I can, and then ride my bike out into the pretty cold, usually weather at 3 a.m. It was probably about 4 by that time, because it takes about an hour to fold all these things, and then take as few rides as I can, to go and chuck these newspapers. And with that many customers, the crazy thing is that I need to remember everyone who's supposed to get a paper. It's not everybody on the street.
It's the White House. You don't give a paper to the Red Houses. Yeah.
It's exactly like the game, except
were you good? I guess you were really good at Paperboy.
It was a hard game to control.
Really it's really hard.
I played that in '85 when it came out. But anyway, that was I then would get done by 6:30, and then I'd basically jump in the shower and have to get ready for school because the bus picked me up at 7:15 in the morning. So it was from 3 a.m. I'm awake. I have to go to sleep about 9. So but I made money so I could play lots of video games. And Pac-Man was like the the big game for me. It was huge. But I got into programming when in 1979, just before, like this is asteroids time period, just before Pac-Man, which was 1980. And my friend said he rode his bike to my house and said, I found a way that we can play games with no money. I'm like, I'm there. So I jumped on my bike and followed him and my brother, and they basically rode up to the local university, like the state or the town college kind of thing, community college, which is a pretty big college. And we rode right up to the computer science building and went inside. And it's the summertime, so the heat, the air differential was like 40-degree difference. 30 to 40 degrees, which was great. Felt really great. But this was because it was 1979, and this school was, in 1979, that was only 2 years after the first trinity of home computers was released, right? Like the PET and the TRS-80 and the Apple II. That was only 2 years later. So it had old stuff in it. So there was a mainframe in the next room, and there were 25 monitors in the main room. Just terminals, and those terminals were all connected to the mainframe, and there were probably a few students in there that were basically learning how to program BASIC and doing their labs. And I went in there with my friend, and he had access to an account from a friend of ours who was going to the college, and he was just down the street. He lived just down the street from us, so we got on the computer, and he started playing games like Hunt the Wumpus and Poison Cookie and Nim and all of these mainframe text game things, until finally I got to see Adventure, and that was really like, wow, this is really cool. And then I found out that you could actually program these things, because he said, yeah, that's what these guys are doing here. They're programming things like this. I'm like, I want to learn how to do that. So I started asking those students what they were typing and writing down like the different basic keywords that they were telling me and what they did. And I go back to that terminal and started experimenting with it, and started making my first adventure game. It was super, super, simple, but it was just learning how the basic language worked, and saving it was me typing the program again on a card punch machine, like those cards that you would feed into the mainframe, and also paper tape, printed out on spools of tape so I could read it back in. So I got the whole like mainframe experience when I was learning how to program, and no one ever kicked me out, which is great because I could come there every day and nobody would kick me out. And that was basically how did I learn how to program.
There's probably more going on behind the scenes there, right? Because, I mean, did you ever find out later if there was somebody who was kind of aware of your presence there, but also making sure that nobody interfered with you? Was there any awareness of anybody like that? Or you were just totally on the radar.
No. Yeah, there was no
fly on the wall.
Nobody, no authority, anybody, just students.
Wow. It's so fun that guys in your generation who are where you are now and have worked with games for so many years, many of them have pretty much the same story. Like I remember talking to Scott, and he did the exact same thing when he lived in Australia. He was sneaking into the university in the summertime, and he just started working on the Apple IIs. And then instead of getting kicked out, he was told, "Here's a key, and you can work as much as you want on these computers." Because when you
God,
it's
that would have been nice.
Because for a while, everybody was kind of at the same level of exposure, right? It was all like new and exciting and prospective to everybody at the same time. And so at that point, like whether you're 8, 18, who gives a fuck?
Yeah. Well, I was 11.
Well,
so that's the difference. I went to a university at 11 and self-taught myself how to program.
That's pretty amazing.
And that's different than other people. And it would have been great if I was older, because I would learn probably faster, because there weren't any books back then. I mean, it was really hard to get information back then. So
yeah, I'm lucky to have my IBM basic manual, the brown 3-ring binder.
To get a manual.
And that's not even like a procedural manual. It's just 1 page per function, and it just tells you the syntax, and that's all you get. So
yeah, that's it. It's just a reference guide. Right. It's a reference. That was until we got a computer, which was in 1982. I would go to the college in the summertime, and then normally after school, I would go to a store that had computers in it, and there were only a few, and I would see if they would let me use the computer. And I would basically I know that I'm typing stuff in that's going to get thrown out as soon as I shut the machine off because I don't have a disk or anything. So it's just like me practicing. And I have a feeling that they probably thought that that was a really good sales tool. Like, a kid can use it. Come on, why don't you want to buy this machine, you know? So so I was just using computers all over town. Luckily, they all used BASIC. They all had BASIC in them. So I was using TRS-80s and Atari 800s and Apple IIs all around town until we finally got our Apple II at home in 1982, and that was it for like being a normal kid, going outside, playing around the creek and the golf course, all that kind of stuff. I was done with sunlight. It was like all about being in front of that computer.
Entered the darkness, and when the came.
From there, of course, I mean, a lot of people know that you kind of ground away getting your own games out the door. A lot of them were even pretty original concepts. Like, you didn't do too many like Pac-Man clones, right? Like, you kind of had some ideas initially that you wanted to get out there and materialize. I know it's probably difficult to like crystallize what that was like at that younger age, like having a concept and needing to get it on the screen. But how did you bridge that gap?
It was awesome. Yeah, I mean, the instant response from the computer to my typing stuff in is the reason why you keep going. And people don't realize that back then it was so much easier to type something into a computer and see it. Nowadays you can't, like, when the computer boots up, it's into a graphical operating system, and you have to get an app or an application or an IDE or something to actually get into the mode where you can actually type things. And then you got to learn this IDE that's like Photoshop to program, and then to see something come up, and you got to read all these guides and books and stuff. And back then, computers shipped with manuals that told you how to program them immediately within minutes. So you turn the computer on, it goes beep, and there's a cursor. Like, it's within a millisecond, your cursor's on the screen, you can start typing. There's no booting really of anything unless you wanted to boot into an operating system to save that thing. And then it would take an extra like 10 seconds maximum. So you're at a prompt and you can immediately start typing 10 print quote hello quote, enter, run, and you see it on the screen immediately. And you just got feedback and it was success, and now I want to keep on doing more. So that's how you keep driving forward. And the more things that you learn, the more you want to experiment with them. And for me, it was like, how do I make a game out of this? So every time I would make a game, it was always with the goal of learning something new about the computer. So I would say, I want to do, a game in low-res graphics so I don't do it in text. And so I learned how to use low-res graphics, and I decided I'm going to make a Crazy Climber clone or something like that, which is just have fun doing that. That's a lot of work. But anyway, I tried it, and I got a low-res building on the screen and got a character moving around on it, and accidentally deleted that, unbelievably. So I was like, okay, well, I got to make something else. And then I learned that there's a high-resolution mode. So now I want to use high-res. And then I make a game called Dodge 'em, And then I'm like, I'm not satisfied with that. I want to have this, And so I come up with another concept to make that game. And so every game was a new way to learn something while making a new thing or exploring maybe a genre a little bit more. Like back then, maze game was a genre.
Right.
And so making maze games was like, that was one of the biggest things. Pac-Man was like the ultimate maze game at that point. So they were all like, so I was doing a lot of maze game type stuff.
Was there a crossover point where your confidence with the tool sets kind of got eclipsed by you having your own voice with the kind of games that you wanted to make and the tone you wanted to convey?
Well, I knew all is funny because it felt like I had been programming in BASIC forever, and 1982 was like we got the computer probably around April of 82, and I lived on it, so it felt like I had been on that computer a long time, even though like by the end of 1982 I was kind of done with BASIC at that time. But I had made so many BASIC games in 1982, probably 20. Maybe 15. But I made a ton of these games. I have all of those games except for the one I deleted. And I knew that I needed to learn assembly language because there was no way I was going to make anything cool like the games I was playing on the computer unless I learned that language. And I remember when I was during those 3 years when I was going to different businesses and stuff to use computers, when I was on at this one place. My friend Rob was there. He's the one who showed me about, he showed me the university mainframe and all that. He was there with me, and I was like, I want to make this. I want to make this. He was showing me Gorgon by Nasser Jabeli. It was a really cool Defender game. And he said, "Oh, you want to know what you have to learn?" I'm like, "Yeah." So he like resets the computer and he goes into the monitor and he shows me memory and he goes, "That's machine language. You need to learn that." And I'm like, "What? That's a bunch of numbers." And he goes, "Yeah, games are just numbers, like everything on a computer." I'm like, "No way." Now I can look at the wall of hex and numbers and tell you exactly what everything means. But back then it was like hieroglyphics. And I'm like, oh my God, that's going to be so hard. But okay, I guess I have to do it, and
how old were you?
Let me think. 14. I think I turned 15 in the fall of 82. So by the fall of 82, when I just turned 15, I was so ready to learn machine language or / assembly language. And I asked my parents at Christmas for a book called Assembly Lines, the book. That was the name of it. I really wanted that book. And then there was another book that Apple Graphics and Arcade Game Design by Jeffrey Stanton. I really wanted that book too because it showed you how to do bitmap graphics, which is what all these games are using. So they got me both books that Christmas, and within like 5 pages of reading the assembly language book, I knew how to program an assembly. I was like, oh my God. And I got on the computer and I just typed in something new that I came up with and it ran. I'm like, no way. It's because I've been reading the manual, the reference guide that came with the Apple II, looking at this for years, just like, why does this make sense? There's nothing that shows me step by step how these things work. It's just a bunch of reference stuff. And this book finally showed me very simply like how to do a very simple program. And I came up with something different to see if it worked, because that was the only way that I could, of course you could type in something from a book and that'll work, but I wanted to come up with something. So I came up with something really quick. It was only a few lines and it worked. I'm like, oh my God. So I started coding assembly and learning it as fast as I could, because during the first week of January, we were leaving California to move to England, and my computer went on a boat for half a year.
Oh my God.
So
Jeez.
The thing, I just learned assembly and I'm about to explode with games, and my computer is taken away from me for half a year.
Did it still work when you left?
It did. Luckily it did.
What did you do in those 6 months?
So what I did was I wrote
Besides
a shitload
suffer.
of games on paper. And so I really learned assembly language / machine language, because I wanted to get this going really quickly. So I would come up with I'm reading this graphics book as well, right? So I'm learning how to do bitmap stuff. I'm doing all of this on paper, and so I'm writing the assembly for how I think these routines should go, and then I am using the assembly language book to translate the assembly into machine code, which is just hex numbers for the different lines. So if I got myself on an Apple II computer, I could quickly just type the hex into memory and run it. I don't need an assembler, because you need an assembler to turn assembly language into machine code. But with machine code, you can just type it directly into a monitor and run it. So luckily our school had Apple II computers in the lab, and I could go in during lunch and I would just spend my lunchtime typing my code that I would write at night on the kitchen table, and type it in to see if these little functions would run and do the things I was trying to do, and they all pieced together into a game.
And still no interference from anybody at the school.
No, actually the funny thing is when I got to school, it was the middle of because it's January, it was the middle of the year, so it was second semester. And I found out when I got to this new school that I didn't need to take PE for a second year, because in California you had to have 2 years of PE. I didn't need to do PE, so they had this computer programming and basic class. I'm like, can I take that?
Jeez.
And the counselor said, well, you're going to have to get permission from the teacher, because this is second semester. You didn't go through first semester. I'm like, I won't have a problem. So I went and so I got to talk to the teacher. She asked me a bunch of questions. I'm like, yeah, I know 6502. So, I'm learning 6502. I can write code in 6502. And I showed her some stuff, and she's like, oh my God, all right. So the second day I come to school, the first day she gives me the approval to be in her class. The second day when I come into her class, she tells the class, read chapter whatever, and use the Apple II to test your stuff. And she's like, John, come with me. And I go with her, and she drives me in her car across base to a place called the Aggressor Squadron. And she takes me in to meet this guy who's a captain there. And he's like, hey, how's it going? You're a whiz at computers, And so he gets on the phone and he says a bunch of code words, and then this giant bank vault door opens up, and he had them all put away, all the confidential stuff, because it was a classified vault. And he took me into the very back of the vault, and they had a Chromemco mini computer on this desk. And he's like, you think you could program that? And I'm like, well, let me see. So I got on it, and I checked it out, and it was using the CP/M operating system, which was, that's Unix, basically. And so I was like, CP/M, and let me see, it's got HP Basic. Yeah, I can program this.
This is Unix, I know.
So I was like, how would you like a... Yeah, exactly. How would you like a job? He's like, how would you like a job? I'm like, hell yeah. So they gave me a job programming.
And who was that teacher who brought you there? Did you ever reconnect with her?
My math teacher.
Holy shit.
Oh yeah, we're on Facebook, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. It's like such a leg up.
So John,
cool.
how did you go from, so that's your first programming job, right? And at this point you've already programmed a bunch, like you said, 20 or so games yourself at home, to various degrees of quality, and
they're all shitty. Yeah, they're shitty.
Emergent.
So you're living in England at this point, right? Or
yeah.
So when did you come back to the States and work with Softdisk?
I came back in 85. I graduated in 85, and during that time is when I discovered the formula that I needed to get my games published in magazines, because that was another thing that people did back in the 80s. Games were published in magazines sometimes, and people would get the magazine and type this whole thing in like they're the programmer. Yeah. And if it worked right, that's great. And you get a game that you just typed in for free, like the cost of a magazine. So I had a lot of rejection slips for years before that. But finally, I figured out what the secret formula was, which is a mixture of BASIC and assembly language to keep the size down, but for it to do as much as it possibly can. So the assembly has to be the core loop and the coolest stuff happening, where the basic stuff is high scores, menus, stuff like that can be really done, quickly and easily in BASIC, where in assembly it would be like 100 lines of code. So the mixture of those two things together meant that I finally sold my first game for $100 to a magazine called Insider, and the game took me probably 30 minutes to make, and it was called Scout Search, and you're basically got a procedural maze, and there are 10 white dots, and they're the little scouts, and there's a red grizzly bear bouncing around everywhere, and you're trying to rescue the dots before the grizzly bear hits them, and when the grizzly bear hits them, you hear a little squeak, like, so, because he just ate a screaming scout. And then you basically pick them all up, and then that's the level. And every level, you go to the next level only if there's another scout still left. So the scouts just keep dwindling down until there's none left, and like, yay, made it to level 12 or whatever. And so that was like a 30-minute game, and it sold for $100. And from that point on, I started making games that were the combination of BASIC and assembly, and I sold everything that I made from that day on.
What was the ratio between getting revenue from this is enabling me to keep doing it, and this is how I want my primary income to be sourced for the rest of my life? Like, what was the mixture there?
Well, I mean, that's what I wanted to do. That was, right. I wanted to make games forever. There was no doubt that I was going to do that. So this was the way to just kind of, the market, changed so much back then because it was so fragmented with all the different kinds of computers. Now we have fragmentation in operating systems in that's the main fragmentation today. Back then it was hardware fragmentation. So it was so many computers. In 1984, there were probably at least 30 different computers. If you get a Byte magazine from around then, or creative computing, you could see like every week new computers are being released constantly. Some of them have like a joystick next to the keyboard, and it comes with the language Forth and ROM. Just stuff like that. Just crazy shit was being released all the time and just super fragmenting everything. So the market was like, what's going to win? Who knows? But it ended up being the IBM PC that was winning. So by the end of the 80s, it had won. Like, it was a 16-bit machine, and all 8-bit stuff had died by the end of the 80s. And by that time, I had by 1989, that was when I went to Softdisk. And like March 20th, I think, is when I went to Softdisk in 1989. And before that, I'd already had 3 startup companies at that time. I'd worked at Origin Systems, where all the Ultimas and stuff were made. Yeah. I got my first job in 87 in the industry. So between my graduating high school in 85 and 2.5 years later going to Origin, that was me still making games, but I was like working in retail software stores or Burger King, Taco Bell, and I was still coding games and selling games like nonstop still. And I probably slowed down to, probably in 85, 86, 87, probably just a few games a year because I was having to do full-time stuff. It might have been 5 games a year. Yeah. But then finally got my job at Origin. It was like, this is like my goal has been met. And the only goal I've ever had was I just want to make games every day. That's it. I don't care about other goals. Other goals are just temporary. The real goal is to just make games every day. So when I finally did that in 87, I had just before then, I published all these games, right? That was through my first game company that I started in 82 when I got the Apple II computer. I started my little company called Capital Ideas Software. So any games that I did sell had the, copyright, Capital Ideas Software in it. And I sold by the time I got to Origin, actually a little even after Origin, because I was still publishing stuff. I'd come home from work and I would make more shit and sell it. So I was doing 2 things at once. I'm working during the day, and then when I come home, I'm making more stuff at night, selling it to disc magazines like Uptime, and still putting it under Capital Ideas Software until I think it was 1988 is when I stopped doing that, because then I started my second game company called Inside Out Software. I left Origin after only 8 months because I had the opportunity to start a company with someone else, like co-found a company with somebody else. So it was called Inside Out Software in the middle of 1988, and I did the Commodore 64 port from the Apple II to the Commodore, and my co-founder did the Apple II to the PC port. We're just next to each other coding this thing.
Best way.
And then I started working on, we basically did this. I did it for about 8 months, and then a game that I was porting from the Commodore to the Apple II was being funded by Epix in the US, EPYX. And they had basically were running out of money. So they had to cancel all their ports to save money for their in-house development that they were like betting the company on. So when that happened, I knew that 8-bit was dead. I need to get the hell out of 8-bit. And the easiest way for me to do that is to get out of that company and to go somewhere where I could just learn the PC all day. So I told my co-founder,
did you own an IBM at that point?
No. Nope. Nope.
So you're still continuing the trend of finding access to machines wherever you happen to be, not necessarily at home.
Well, no, I didn't have to do it at that point because I had a full-time job, I was on a machine all day. So when I was at Origin, I had an Apple II GS and a Commodore 128D next to me because I was porting a game from the Apple to the Commodore, and the cool thing I did there was I hated the big keyboard on the Commodore. It was just, I don't know how anyone could code on that thing, and the Apple II GS is like a Mac keyboard today. It's the same keyboard, right? So it felt like a great thing. So I basically decided I'm going to make the Commodore game on the Apple. So the Apple is my dev machine, and I'm just going to transfer it over to the Commodore and run it. And so that was my cross development. The first time I did cross development was I'm programming an entire game for the Commodore, but on an Apple II GS at 3.5 megahertz and like really fast hard drive and all this stuff. And then when it needs to run on the Commodore, I run this program using a cable that I created from telephone wire and soldering all this shit, plugging them to the computers together, and writing my own transfer software to get the stuff across, because there wasn't a way to do that back then. There wasn't a way to take stuff from an Apple II and put it on a Commodore.
And that's the day you learned the word heretic. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I made this transfer system and I ported the game like that. And that cross development thing was actually a pretty cool idea. And but when it all went down, like when 8-bit was done, I made it easy on my co-founder and just said, "Hey, I'm gonna I'll leave, so my salary is not pulling anyone down, and you can pay these other people a little bit easier, and then you have the company, and I'm gonna take off." So when I took off, I went to live with a friend of mine. It was just for a few months. His name is Lane Roth, and he was a really great programmer. And he was working on the Dark Castle Mac to Apple II GS port, and I got to do work on that. So I did all the art for that. I converted a black and white game over to 16 color game on the GS. That was published by 360 Pacific back then. So I worked on that. We worked on an operating system for Infocom. If you remember, Infocom was the
Infocom Adventures, yeah.
Yeah, so we wrote an operating system for 4 of their last games that they made on the Apple II. It needed to be a 4K OS that was hidden from everything in the computer. So we hid it underneath bank switched memory. And so my Lane wrote the RWTS function, which reads a sector off of the disk. And I wrote all of the code on top of that makes it an operating system that was an invisible plugin for ProDOS, which was the operating system on the Apple that everybody used. So your code could still issue these ProDOS commands, and I would interpret them and use our super stripped down OS to do exactly what you wanted, but really fast and really small. So anyway, we did work for Infocom and all this stuff, and we created a company called Ideas from the Deep at that time. So that was just me and Lane. And we did these games, and we also did Zapperoids, which was our we're going to Softdisk game. So we went down to Softdisk and we interviewed there, and it was like the greatest interview with the guys there at Softdisk. And they're like, "We want to hire you." And I said, "All right, do you guys need any games for any of your disks? Because you have like Commodore disks, Mac disk." Commodore, Mac, Apple II GS, and PC disks. So do you guys need, maybe an Apple II version and a GS version, because we don't have a PC right now. So how about this? We will go fly back, we'll make this game, and by the time we're here, we will finish those games. And they're like, "What?" So that's what we did. We flew back, immediately started making Zapperoids. Lane worked on the Apple II GS version. I worked on the Apple II version. We didn't share any code because we were going too fast to do that.
Right. So
we just shared the design.
You were kind of working in your own kind of silos, right? But you were working on different versions, but you weren't,
we were
sharing
together.
code. You weren't sharing assets.
No, we were not
Just
even assets.
Because his
graphics had to be in a completely different format than my graphics, and our code had to be different because he's using system routines where I can't have any because there wasn't any in the mode that I was using. So we just shared the design. Here's what the design is. Make it.
Right.
And then we would tweak our design together. It would be cool if there was a thing that showed where the aliens are coming from and stuff. And anyway, so we just okay, I'll put that in. It's I'm doing it like this. Okay, yeah, I'll use that calculation.
But it's still not quite the same thing as working in a team and delegating tasks. It's still a very linear thing.
Yeah, it was the same way that we've been making stuff for, at that point, 10 years. So we finished the game, and when we got to Softdisk, 2 weeks later, here they are. And then as soon as I started working at Softdisk there, I pretty quickly I basically made a PC version of my Apple II game. So there was an Apple II version, a PC version, and then the Apple II GS version. So
do you remember when you came back to Softdisk the first day you met Carmack and Adrian and so on, because they were at Softdisk at this time as well, right?
No, I hired them. So I was at Softdisk in 1989, and I worked at Softdisk for a whole year until 1990, around April, because I know we got there in March. It was for a little over a year, probably April time period is when I was finally just done with not being able to make cool games. I wanted to make games, and the problem is that everything that company was set up to do was to ship at the end of a month. Every month you start a new project and it ships at the end of the month.
Meanwhile,
very
you're still
limiting in what you can
you're still in this mode of the next game I want to learn how to do this, and the next game I want to learn how to do that, and that takes more time.
I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that at that time because I needed to learn the PC. I needed to learn all the hardware of the PC to even make games. So my first thing getting that whole first year was like me learning everything about the PC. How to program an 8086, everything about the BIOS, everything about the ports, everything about all of the stuff on the machine. And I was delivering stuff every single month. You know, it was a utility or it was a port of an Apple II game that I did. You know, like I needed to produce every month. And when I got there, it would take too long to learn assembly. And I thought, like, I don't want to program in BASIC anymore. You know, so I used Pascal as my first language there. So I started making games in Pascal. It was only a couple months I made games in Pascal because at the same time I'm learning assembly as fast as I can, and then I did assembly only after that point. So I was writing TSRs and I was writing really fast tools to, you know, do things like view files quickly, or TSRs that would do file viewing, you know, instantaneous pops up. Lots of cool stuff that was hidden in memory. And
so
then
at that point, you're already doing
games.
like utility stuff, which we all know, like kind of was a trend.
Well, I'd been doing tools on the Apple II as well.
Right.
I did lots of tools on the Apple, and because this is like a nonstop thing for me, when I got home, I would continue writing games for the Apple II Softdisk disk, right? So I'm working on the PC. I come home, I'm writing games for the Apple II version because they give me money for that, so I can sell those things. And so it was like nonstop making games. Like I had to fulfill myself at least at home, but I wanted it to be more than that. So I told the owner of the company, hey, I'm going to take off. You know, like I got to make games and I can't do it here because of these timelines, and I'm not doing what I want to do, which is like make games constantly. So he said, don't leave. We'll set up a whole game thing for you. How about that? And I said, well, only if I can hire a team and I can do it in 2 months instead of 1 month.
Damn.
So he's like, no problem.
But at
I'm
this
like, 2
point,
months with a team. Oh my god!
You still hadn't been in a position where you were delegating tasks to like different team members. It was still like Romero production front to back. So these guys, you know, whoever they were, ended up being, were like the first ones that you ended up you're working this
together
and figuring out what your roles are. You know, that ends up being organic for a while, and at some point it needs to stratify. Yeah,
it happened pretty quickly. Yeah, when I was when he officially said we can do this thing, marketing and accounting and everything had to spool up a whole new set of books, marketing plans, fulfillment plan. It's like a huge deal to create a whole new subscription product, right? So it was taking them a while, and I'm like, okay, well, I need to find a programmer to work with me. I got to find a really good programmer. And on one of the games I made at home and sold to the Apple II disc, when they published that disc, on the same disc was another guy named John Carmack who had written a tennis game. And I made a game called Substalker on there, and he made a game called Tennis. And I remember seeing Tennis going, wow, this guy's a good programmer.
Substalker's
Meanwhile,
a cool name,
I'm like, I know. I've been making game names for years, right? So I was pretty good at it. So when I thought about I need to hire a programmer, the first person I thought about was John, but then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I need a PC coder because this is a PC disk. You know, like at that time I could program the Apple II and the Commodore 64 and the PC, you know, all in assembly and stuff. And so I need somebody who can program the PC really well. And I talked to the Apple II guys because he had been sending them Apple II stuff. And they said, oh, no, he's really good. So we've tried to hire him twice already, and he's turned us down. And I'm like, well, I need him to be PC. And he's like, oh, he knows a PC as well. I'm like, well, how's that? He's sending you guys Apple II stuff. And they said, well, he found out that if he could make a PC version of his Apple II games, that we would pay twice as much for the PC version. So he's making 3 times the money. So what he did was he went and rented a PC for a week, learned it, ported the game, and returned the PC. So he learned how to code the PC in a week, imported his game in a week, and then returned the rental.
So somebody out
And
there
like,
acquired that PC.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, I need to talk to this guy. And they're like, well, we tried to hire him twice, and it's not going to do it. And I said, I think if he talks to me, he's going to be coming here because, you know, you don't find, you know, people that good everywhere. And he probably hasn't talked to anybody that has as much experience as I have.
Yeah.
Because I was just full of myself back then. So anyway, so they got him an interview, and he came down, and we had like the best meeting ever. Lane came with me. So it was yet another hardcore assembly language programmer who could do multiple computers. He did Apple II, the GS, and the Macintosh. You know, and we basically, both of us together covered everything except for the Amiga, basically, in the Atari ST, in the 800. So it was everything. So John was like massively impressed. He wanted that job at that point. So we hired him immediately. And when he finally moved down, the first thing I had him do was, I didn't even have the office yet. I didn't have the room. So I told John, just make a game and it'll go to the Apple II department. You'll be helping them before we actually get our room. So I hired you when I could get you, but I have to wait a little bit before that happens. So he made a game called Catacomb for the Apple II, gave it to the Apple II department. I finally get the room. It's a 10 by 10 room. We basically click out all the stupid fluorescent lights. It's gonna be a dark room. And because the owner of the company at that point had kind of mentally pivoted to this group is going to save this company. So I was going to get anything
Dangerous
I needed.
To tell
so I'm
you.
like, I need 386 DX 33s with 4 megs of RAM, dude. Like I need 3 of those. You know,
You want your
4
company?
of them. I need 4. Yeah,
that sounds very expensive.
back then it was really expensive. So he did it. So we got all the four of those DX33s, and I wanted a Nintendo, and I wanted Zelda, and I wanted Super Mario 3 and the Life Force, which is a really cool shooter. And we got that, and we could have it just running all day long in the corner. And it was like the coolest room. I like put my boombox back here, and we're just playing metal all day, and you know, for all of us. And we basically just start coding. And the funny thing was, the first thing that we had to do was like, marketing says, okay, we know that we screwed up and we took too much time getting you guys your office and starting up, and we need to put a demo disc out with our flagship PC product that shows everybody what you guys can do, and we need to hurry up and do it. So this is the only time this will happen, but we want to put 2 games on this disc, and you got to do it in a month. And it's like, this is the opposite of the deal, which is 1 game in 2 months. You want 2 games in 1 month.
Oh, do you have a
like, it's only,
you can do one in a week?
Like,
so
it's only for the demo. Yeah, I was like, it's only for the demo. And I didn't know. I mean, Carmack was really good, but you know, I
untested
at that point
in that
didn't
way.
know, how dedicated he was. You know, but like it seemed like he was looking for that kind of dedication. So when we got in the room, I was like, okay, this is what you have to do, John. We don't have time to design a new thing because it's 1 month. So we need to take something that we made already, like you just made Catacomb. You need to make that on the PC. I'm going to take a game I made a couple years ago called Dangerous Dave, and I'm going to make that on the PC. And we're going to do it starting today, and we have to ship it by the end of the month. And we need a shell program that boots up and shows the games and shows the text and all that kind of shit. And we're probably going to have to use compression to get these 2 games on the disc, so we have to figure that out, that as well, while we're doing all the other stuff, right? So that's what we did. We just coded like crazy, and insanely, when I was doing, like, as programmers back then, we were always competitive, like just innately competitive. When you're an assembly language programmer and you have testosterone blowing through your system constantly, you're just competitive, right? So we were just like, let's see how fast we can get this done. How fast can you get yours done? How good is your game going to be, you know? And so when I was making Dangerous Dave, you know, on the Apple II, it was just a game in high res. But on the PC, it's like there's a CGA mode and an EGA mode and a VGA mode. And I'm going to do all 3 modes How about that? I'm going to do all the graphics for 3 different graphic modes. I'm going to let you switch modes.
After the insane deadline has already been set, you're just
exactly. This is the insane deadline.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how about this? In the middle of a jump, I'm going to let you switch graphic modes at any time. You can be doing anything. And you can be jumping and then hit the F2 key, switch graphic modes, and continue your jump in a completely different mode. So I did all that. So I think it's the only game on the PC that ever did that. So you can switch between any of those 3 graphic modes. And it was funny because I started making the game in assembly language, and John's just like, "Why are you doing that? You can program in C, right?" I'm like, "Oh my god, I totally forgot about C." Because I was looking. The funny thing is, I was looking forward to doing my own disk and not being in the PC department, because the rule in the PC department was, if you don't know the languages that George knows, you can't program in them. And he only knew BASIC and assembly, which is why I did assembly the whole time over there. But I wanted to do BASIC, and they said, no, you can't, because George doesn't know it. And he's never leaving, and you might leave, and he might need to look at your code. And if it's in C, he can't fix it. So I'm like, this is stupid. Okay. So when I got it, I'm like, I can't wait to have my own thing and do C. And as soon as we started, I forgot about that rule. So then John reminded me. I'm like, oh, yeah, what am I doing? This has to be in C. So I immediately switch over to C, and we got the games and
mid-month.
Everything.
This is
done.
After the goal's already been set, and you're learning C.
No, we're talking within days. Within days. This is things happen so fast. You have no idea. Like the amount of things that happened in one single day was insane. And we basically would work. At that point on that disk, it was at 16 hours a day just to get that first month going. And then after that point, we knew that we could slow down on it. But then when we decided that we were going to make Commander Keen, we were back to 16-hour days, because we had to do an 8-hour day from 10 to 6 on Softdisk stuff, and then from 6 to 2 in the morning on Commander Keen, because we wanted to ship for Christmas. So we made 2 games for Softdisk in that time, and 3 Commander Keen games in that time, in 3 months.
So
five games.
Before we jump into Commander Keen, tell us the story about the fan letters and the Super Mario Brothers 3 demo requested by Scott Miller himself. What was that about? It was very creepy.
That still exists, by the way.
I had them up on. I got these fan letters, and I put them up on the wall, and I thought I had these cool fans. I didn't notice that they were all on yellow lined paper, or that the handwriting was the same. And I didn't notice that the address was the same.
You have this one.
But I was reading PC Games magazine one day, and I got to the end of an article on Cross, and at the very end it said, this guy Scott Miller, and it's got his address at the end. I'm like, wait a minute, where have I seen that? I know that address. And I go, I look at the wall. I look at the wall. I'm like, no fucking way. Oh my god. He's psycho. I looked at all of them. I pulled them all down. So I'm like, this isn't even real. This isn't even real.
He's in the bushes outside.
It was crazy. So I wrote him back, and I wrote him a letter that was just like, you are psycho. I can't remember what I actually still have that letter. And then I decided to wait till the next day, and then I wrote a cool down letter, but I included the original one telling him this is how pissed off I was. And I sent it to him, and Scott, he when he's focused on stuff, he doesn't care about like any negative stuff. So he was just like, yeah, whatever. I just want to get you on the phone because I need you to make a game for me. I'm like, but you're a psycho. He's like, no, it's just to get in touch with you. That's
that's like a non-compete and everything.
Whatever it takes.
This call, right? Yeah.
So anyway, it was actually a funny way to get in touch with Scott. And then we, at the same time, we discovered the scrolling trick and make the Super Mario 3 demo over a week, putting it together to try and send it to Nintendo, and then I think that's what I sent to Scott to show him. Like he wanted one of my earlier games, and I just said, dude, this stuff is even cooler. So I sent him that, and it was like nuclear explosion, and then it was like Commander Keen. and so that's how King
Was there an element
happened.
of you developing these techniques and then, showing Softdisk, like, this is what we're capable of, and they go, yeah, that's neat, that's enough for the deadline, whatever, and you're going, don't you guys know that this is, like, really, really fucking cool? Don't you get that?
No. It was too cool. I knew it was too cool for Softdisk.
Immediately.
But
I was like,
they were enabling you,
immediately.
but they were the man.
They weren't gonna do anything.
How did it feel looking at all the Japanese games on consoles? Because at this point, when you're looking at the NES, even back in '89 when Super Mario Bros. 3 came out, it's so far ahead of anything that's even conceivable on a PC.
Oh, I know.
And here you are, like, still you're working cutting edge, you're working assembly and then C, and you're working with Carmack, and then you're just watching these Japanese dudes on an 8-bit machine making all this crazy stuff. Like, how was it looking at those guys?
It wasn't. It's funny because it was a different world, so we didn't look at it like, oh, we'll never be able to do cool stuff. It was like that machine was made for that, and what was impressive was just the designs that they had.
Yeah.
And that's not a hardware thing. That's a design thing. That's a mental thing. So it was like, we want to make stuff that cool on PCs because that's the challenge. It's not a challenge to do it on those machines because that's what they do, but it's hard to make this thing do that. So that's where the challenge was. So we worshipped at Shigeru's temple and all that. He's the best.
Well, Super Mario Bros. 3 is, I would say, still undoubtedly, for me personally, the best game ever made.
In terms of scope, yeah.
It's
crazy amount of
amazing.
there.
Yeah,
It's still insane.
Yeah,
I beat it.
It's still insane. I'm still, if I sit down and play SMB3, I just want to keep playing. It's still so freaking
I loved
good.
it. I loved every one of them.
There was a time there around when Doom came out, when the PC kind of overtook, I would say, for the first time, because then the console started struggling. You had the PlayStation version of Doom, it kind of struggled. You had the Saturn version and so on, and Jaguar. Like, how did it feel being part of that first wave of, okay, we finally got the PC to overtake the dedicated game machines?
That was with Wolfenstein.
Yeah.
And we didn't even think about that. It was just like, this is what we're doing on this platform. This is a game platform, and we're gonna do what we can to take advantage of it in the best way possible that nothing else can. So that's basically what we did. I can't stay on forever, but I can't. I mean, I would be here forever if I kept on talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, the rest of that story, from Catacomb to Wolf to Doom and Quake and everything, is incredibly well documented. Hope we get a movie at some point. There's actually that really cool Twitter account doing the Masters of Doom book without words, like it's this wordless comic.
There's also
really
going
cool.
to be a Netflix. There's going to be a Netflix show.
Yeah.
As far as is it HBO of
It's
the
USA Networks.
Do you know who's going to play
awesome.
you?
Yeah. It's just do a Google. You'll find out. You'll see the guy.
It's you, right? You're playing you? You get to play you?
No.
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 John
So they got actual actors, and not somebody who's old,
But, I mean, yes, a lot of that is, I don't want to say exhaustively documented. There's always wrinkles. There's always different perspectives. Even, Kushner's book, there's like lots of kind of ways to kind of go about that. But now, you put out Sigil a year and a half ago, and I know you're back into like dev mode. You're deep in this cave with the other things you're working on, but obviously Sigil came out of somewhere. You did your E1M8 B, which was really cool. Like it was like a couple of years before that, a year before
It was
Sigil
in
or so?
2016. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I guess the question of what made you come back to doing that would be kind of trite, but what was it actually like going back and like doing a Doom map? I know you used like Doom Builder. But like coming back into and working with the same entities, working with the same gameplay loops, playing those levels, it felt like, you were riding a bike, right? Like it just, it flowed from the same source.
Doom is back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like I never stopped making levels. It was really simple, It wasn't a problem designing same way that I designed before. So it was really, I was just doing the same thing that I had to do before, which is like come up with an idea for a level that's going to be cool, and then just make it, and it was really not hard. You know, it just takes a lot of time.
Because it's the same toy box, right? It's kind of got that Mario Nintendo thing where you have your Koopas, you know how they work, you have your Goombas, you know how they work, and you can put them together in any number of ways. You even started using like a decorate object as a shootable switch semi-consistently.
Yeah, that was my new thing.
But it's the same toolbox, and so in some ways, and I think we've seen this a little bit with like Mario Maker, right, where you give people a consistent way to approach the same tools, the same entities, and you get n number of mutations out of that, and it can go on forever.
Another
thing,
Doom's
been doing that since we released it. You know, I mean, levels are released every single day, hundreds of thousands of them. So
yeah, and some of them are crazy art mods that, you know, replace everything, and the code's all different, and it's all running on GZ Doom. Sigil was a little bit more vanilla, but you still ended up getting a lot of flexibility out of it, a lot of cool ideas that, you know, even people in the scene haven't seen too much of.
Yeah, it needed to be, it needed to feel like we made it back then, so it wasn't like, oh, this is a weird, like, very different than the original series because it's super detailed or whatever. And it's Doom 1, which is really limited in the palette of what you can put in a level. So I was going to make it feel like it was an original thing and try and do some new things in it. So there's several new things in it. And like for me, Buckethead's music was like the biggest cool thing for me.
I think you succeeded. I think, you know, on a finishing note here, I think it's also a good time to wrap this up, you know, going from the past to, you know, the present day, which is kind of still the past now. We have a new episode of Doom from Romero, but it feels like not only does it feel like Doom, but it also feels like here's Doom, but with all of the additional game design experience and knowledge added on top. Kind of how can I push the limits as much as possible without it feeling at it?
And in that respect, the age doesn't matter.
Published it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Full circle, man. Full circle.
And there's an aspect where it's not even like a retro thing anymore, right? Like, this is objectively good stuff. It's objectively good gameplay. It feels good. The pinky hitting the floor still feels good every single time, a billion times after doing it after the first time. So did you get everything out of Sigil that you wanted to do? Was there anything kind of on the cutting room floor like I could have pushed it in this direction? It was totally complete.
It was exactly everything I wanted to do. I worked on those levels a lot. I mean, there's a lot of data in there. If you don't make Doom levels, there's a shitload of information on every line segment, and those levels have thousands of lines. So I had a team of 5 to 7 people going over what I made to make sure that technically they're correct, down to the values on every line, that I'm not misusing something. And there were so many technical issues that had to get fixed, just because it's an old game and it's got specific rules, and if you do this thing, like being able to have this, being able to add a ton of line segments, nowadays, because there's more memory and these source ports are limit removing, it means I can put more detail into it, but not too much, not to like make it not look like it's like old school, but just a little bit more, so it looks a little bit better than what you remember it to be.
Liberating, hopefully.
Yeah, and but I can do like new things that I haven't seen in Doom levels before, and but that just means more line segments to double check, and like using different node builders and stuff, because maybe there's a slime trail on one level, so use a different node builder for that one level, and God, it's like having to use different versions of Doom. Like, can't record a demo of GZ Doom. You have to use a different, like, Chocolate Doom to record the level that's going to be in the GZ Doom, in the WAD, So it's like unbelievable amount of technical things just to make this thing solid when it comes out, so people don't run it and go, oh my God, how sloppy, because people immediately will take it and break that WAD apart and look at every little piece of data in the WAD. So everything in the WAD has to look good.
Which is a great opportunity. It's how a lot of people have learned. It's how I've learned. And I've also learned a lot from, you putting out like the Quake map sources, like being able to like finally after years and years, like tear those down properly. And there's a lot, like you said, a lot of information in there.
Yeah. There's more than Quake, for sure. Way more than Quake. Quake had, if you look at the map sources, there's a lot of like brushes, a shitload of brushes, and what those brushes are composed of. That's nothing like the Quake, the Doom stuff. Like the Doom stuff is line segments, with a top and a middle texture and a bottom texture, and what the offsets are on them, what the line specials are. Front and back of every line has information on them. They reference sectors, which are different data structures. It's super complex. But so it's a lot of stuff to double check. And that's just kind of one of the reasons why it took so long to make it, because I wanted it to be really solid when it came out. And I had a really great team that's in the credits that did an amazing job double checking all that and helping out at whatever time I was able to work on it. Some of them are European, so it was like, hey, it's 1 a.m. Can you do this?
Yeah.
Well, you didn't have to make the Crusher room. That was that was painful.
I fixed that. I fixed that. It's half of the how bad it was when I first released.
John,
so 1.2 is a little less.
John, it's fantastic, nevertheless, to see you back making games based on your roots, and also making brand new games with your wife. I want to thank you so much for taking your time tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
To do this with us. It's been a true pleasure, and I'm sure that all of the old school shooter fans are going to enjoy hearing about the past and how you got into gaming and all the cool stories about making games at the university and on terminals and everything. It's been a true pleasure, man. Thank you so much for joining
thanks for having
us.
me here.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much for being here. It's awesome.
All right.